You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometime, you find you'll get what you need. Any Rolling Stones fans out there? May not be an expected or a likely place, but the Rolling Stones and Mick Jagger, I think, sing something in this line that can speak something of truth to us today. And I want to reflect on it a little bit, so hang with me as we unpack this a little bit. This morning, we want to acknowledge that all of us have wants and desires and needs. Desire comes from the Greek word eros. And eros is this thing that God has put in all of us, that we desire things. Just think about all the things that you've desired in this past week. And desire is good because it moves us towards things that fulfill us. Jesus gives in the Our Father, he gives this example of our daily bread. Right? We yearn for bread. We yearn for things that fulfill us. Part of what it means to be human is to have desires and to want things. And we know from time to time, from one reason or the other, our desires can go unmet. And when our desires are unmet, we can feel an ache inside of us, a kind of a yearning for that thing or whatever that thing can help to provide us internally. And even though the presence of this interior ache, this interior yearning, can be unsettling, it's not at the end of the day going to kill us. It might be a little unbearable, but we'll still live through it. Today we want to acknowledge that God has created us with desires for many things, but also very deep desires, insatiable desires. And in knowing that he's called us to fulfillment, sometimes we don't get he's not going to fill us with what we want, but he's going to fill us with what we need. In the gospel, we have Jesus speaking with his disciples and people around him. It's right after the feeding of the 5,000 that we heard last week. And Jesus says, do not work for food that perishes. He says, work for food that is rooted in everlasting life, that endures. In other words, don't live for what you want, but live for what you really need. Because if we're honest, when we have these desires, when we have things in our life that we're yearning for, we can often look to quick fixes. We can look to things that immediately kind of fill those needs. There's food and drink, entertainment, vacations, kind of things we can easily grasp at. And if we aren't able to kind of get that thing that we want, we complain. Like the Israelites in the first reading. So they've been led out of Egypt by God. They're saved, but they're complaining in the desert, and they're hungry. They want God to feed them. Because in Egypt, they had all kinds of food. They had all kinds of things. Now they're in this desert place. If we were only in Egypt. But when they were in Egypt, yeah, they had some of their desires fulfilled. They could grasp for things immediately to fill themselves. But they're also slaves in Egypt. They weren't living in freedom. But in the gospel, they're asking Jesus to bring about fulfillment. And they want Jesus to show them a sign. Give us something that we can know that we're fulfilled. And he says that I am the bread of life. It's kind of a strange image, kind of a strange statement, but one that's good to think about and to pray with. After Jesus says this, as they're looking for something, kind of real and tangible, I wonder after he said this, if he received kind of an underwhelming reaction. And it's like, yeah, Jesus, yeah, you're great, but are you really going to be the solution? I have so many particular needs and desires, and I've kind of figured out how to fill them on my own with different things. But then he essentially says that while, yes, there are many things that you want, I am all that you need. How often in the midst of struggle, in the midst of our desires, do we turn to Jesus and trust that he will fill us? Do we know that he's all that we need? Or is Jesus' presence, sometimes unsatisfying or underwhelming? The gift of the Eucharist that we celebrate today is undoubtedly God's presence with us. It's Jesus, the bread of life, and his body, his blood, his soul, and divinity. And in truth, for as good as the Eucharist is, source and summit of our faith, knowing our hearts and how our hearts work sometimes, it may not be the solution that we want, especially if we're in the midst of something particular. How is this little piece of bread really going to help fix my problems? But it's definitely the gift that we need because God has promised it. Being a people that celebrates and receives the Eucharist may not take away all of our problems magically, but knowing that Jesus is deeply within us, he fills us amidst our yearnings and our desires, really and truly can change everything. Last week, I was down in Columbus for a Catholic youth summer camp, so my voice is a little raspy this morning. I'm a little run down, and it was around a bunch of 500 screaming middle schoolers and high schoolers all week, so it was a good time. But it was good to celebrate Mass with them every day. It was good to celebrate the Eucharist with them every day, because I know some of these kids, their families aren't necessarily coming to Mass on a weekly basis. So to have them filled with the Eucharist and filled with Jesus every day was beautiful. And so it's a high adventure summer camp, and then there's other things that you do spiritually throughout the week. And the theme was Magnificare. So it's a Latin word. It means to magnify. So it comes from the Magnificat, Mary, as she, my soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord. And so throughout the week, we looked to Mary to see her posture, her example of how we can magnify, how we can make Jesus more present within our lives. And Mary is an example. She's a model disciple because she is one who is rooted in all that the Lord would provide for her. Mary certainly had wants and desires. She was a human being. And she had great trials and tribulations as she was raising Jesus, throughout her life. But ultimately, she gave her fiat, her yes. Let it be done unto me according to thy word. And this is the fundamental posture that we need to have as Christians. Being open to whatever God wants to do in our lives and however he wants to fill us. So what are our needs and our desires today? Do we want to do something exciting or fun this afternoon? Do we want to just, sit back and watch the Olympics and just take a nap? Do we want peace amidst a struggle? Do we not want to feel lonely? Do we want to feel like our life has a greater purpose? Amidst these questions, amidst these yearnings, let us rest in the fact that we have two amazing gifts to rest in. They might seem underwhelming to the world, but they're very real. The gift of Mary, her presence in the church, her example and her intercession for us. And also the Eucharist, the gift of receiving Jesus and his body, his blood, his soul, and his divinity, the bread of life, who will meet us in our need and fill us. Mick Jagger may not have been right about a great many things, in life, but I definitely think he wasn't wrong all of the time. We don't always exactly get what we want, but as of people of faith, we do know that our God, a God who is faithful and providential, will supply us with all that we need.